In the fall of 1979, the best player to ever have played the game in Wayne Gretzky joined the NHL officially after playing in the World Hockey Association, or WHA. Gretzky would later go on to take the Edmonton Oilers' struggling franchise into the Promised Land after winning 4 Stanley Cups in less than 10 years with the team. But what if things were different and the Great One was never to sport the navy blue and orange in the NHL? How would this have shaped not only the Oilers franchise, but also the league in return? So before we really dive into how, let's start with why first. 1979 was a very unique year in the hockey world, as the NHL and WHA were finally ending their ongoing competition to be the most represented league available. As you may know, players from the latter were then absorbed into the league that stood the test of time in the NHL. Therefore, like a typical NHL expansion draft, teams being absorbed were naturally allowed to protect a handful of their players, ones that they felt would be most suitable to grow a franchise around. But Gretzky's situation was a rarity in and of itself, as he was eligible to be taken in the draft, as the NHL coincidentally had just lowered the draft age from 20 to 18 in result. In order to keep the young phenom on the Oilers roster, the team owner at the time, Peter Paulington, did so by using a loophole, and made a decision that possibly saved the franchise. Paulington argued that he should be able to keep the forward, as he wasn't signed to a standard contract like his peers, but rather to a personal services one. This would cause Gretzky to be ineligible for the draft and leave him with the choice to make: to stay with the Oilers or be drafted by the Colorado Rockies. And no, I'm not talking MLB here. The Rockies were, as you probably guessed it, a team on its last limbs, and had just finished the season with 15 wins and 53 losses. Therefore, it's not hard to understand why the Great One chose to stay with the Oil amidst the transition, as they were the better team. But now that we've covered why, let's get into the how. How would things have changed if Gretzky had been drafted instead by the Colorado Rockies, and never had the opportunity to turn things around in Edmonton? Well, for starters, both of these teams would most definitely have had a different outcome. The team was sold in 1982 and ultimately became the New Jersey Devils. But if it had an immensely talented player on its roster in Gretzky, it would have seemed more profitable for its current owner. Therefore, if the Rockies continued to exist in the 90s, then the Quebec Nordiques would have moved elsewhere, and the Avalanche wouldn't have been created. Now, this does sound like a lot of what ifs, because just like Gretzky and the Edmonton situation, many things would have to fall into place correctly for this domino effect to begin. But let's just say hypothetically that this would be the ultimate result if the Great One was drafted. But on to the flip side, what would have happened to the Oilers? Well, you can pretty much assume that without Gretzky putting up his astronomical numbers season after season, that the team would naturally have struggled, and wouldn't have nearly the amount of championships that it has today. Players like Messier and Anderson probably wouldn't have had the same success during their careers, and possibly wouldn't have had their Hall of Fame endings. And lastly, it's even probable that Edmonton would have endured the same fate as their WHA merger counterparts, as the Connecticut Whalers, Quebec Nordiques, and Winnipeg Jets all found themselves being relocated. Therefore, if it wasn't for the Oilers owner and Gretzky choosing to stay with his team in Edmonton, things could be very different in the league still today.